7.3 trillion down to 7.1. Are you kidding me? Again, nobody can refute or has even attempted to refute my logic on a pre-pandemic level of spending. Here's one of the things that the House blew, even in their meager spending reductions of $150 billion a year, 1.5 trillion over 10 years, they gave instructions to the E&C committee. 880 billion is coming out of that committee. All they can do is cut Medicare and Medicaid. And I'm saying you don't have to do that. You can exempt all those and still save $700 billion off of what we're spending today just by going back to 2019 spending levels, inflated for population growth and inflation.
The people who oppose that sound very swampy to me.
That's the problem. We're dealing with the swamp. They've never been in business. They don't realize how easy this would be in business. First of all, we don't even know total spending. 3 years ago during an omnibus spending fight, I asked my Republican colleagues, hey, anybody know how much we spent last year in total? Nobody answered. I went out the press corps. Somebody said, well, it's like over $1 trillion. No, that's just discretionary spending. I'm talking about total spending. The answer was $6.5 trillion. We're the largest financial entity in the world, and nobody knows how much in total we spent. They do now.
Good Wednesday to you. Senator Ron Johnson is about to come up, and he has a lot to say on spending. You may recall, Senator Johnson has been a huge leader in trying to reduce the deficit and bring a businessman's degree of common sense, which is something that on a bipartisan basis we need more of. I mean, I hate to say it, but a lot of folks need to sign both sides of a check, if you know what I mean. Like Ron Johnson. Knows what it's like to run a business, knows what it's like to look at the ledger and make sure that we're going through it correctly. Because too many people don't get it. And I know DC, sometimes it gets like overwhelming with all of the Washington speak. And that's part of the problem, is that the goal is, hey, if we just talk in a certain way, most Americans won't understand it. Current law versus current policy. You'll never know. And it's true. Because we'll get into this with Senator Johnson in a second. But so many people talk about reining in spending. The dirty little secret is this. The way Washington works, and again, I don't want to get ahead of it because there's a lot to get into with some of these other stuff. If you get $100 as an agency or department this year, and next year you say we need to go to 110, in Washington, appropriators give you 106. In Washington speak, you cut your budget by 4%, $4. I mean, do you understand how nuts that is? You just got $6 more than you did the year before, but because you asked for 10 and only got 6, you actually took a $4 cut. That's nuts. That's Washington. That's how it works. And so every time people say they cut, they really don't. I mean, to me and to you, I know what a cut looks like. Don't you? When I have $100 and I get 99 the next year, that's a cut. In Washington, if you don't get as much as you wanted, that's a cut. And that's how they weasel around actually being honest with what's going on in the budget. Zero-based budgeting is what most companies do. I've done it in my company. I've done it in my personal life. I've done it in other campaigns and jobs where you build it from the bottom up. I have $0. Here's what I need to spend. Build up the budget. The way Washington works is it starts with whatever you got last year. So no matter how bloated and how bad. So think about it. Through COVID, we're throwing money at people. That's a new baseline. So when you go forward, that's what you get. We're going to get into this because he does a better job as a very accomplished businessman of explaining it than I do. But Washington is still abuzz about SignalGate. And day 2 of the hearings continue today. So all those folks were pre-scheduled to testify in front of the House and Senate. Yesterday with the Senate, today in front of the House. So you have the CIA director, the DNI director. So CIA is John Ratcliffe, CIA or DNI Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Kash Patel is up there, the Director of the National Security Agency, who's a military officer. He's testifying. And that's just normally how it works. They get up there, they talk about what they're doing, why they need more money, etc. This is the process. Just happened to be a little unfortunate in terms of timing. But where this story started and where it is today is not the same place. So let me kind of explain to you, there's 2 big issues at stake. One was this encrypted app. Okay, so a lot of times you and I, we all text over the message app, or we send an email. And then, as many of you know, like there's another app called Confide. There's one called WhatsApp. Well, Signal is the one that these folks are using. It is probably, in my opinion, the safest because it's got more what they call end-to-end encryption. What does that mean? It means when I send a message to you and you send it back to me, there's pretty much no way of breaking it. They don't keep the metadata in the same way that a lot of these other countries do, meaning if they hack into it, what's there, a lot of the stuff goes away. So, and it's run by a nonprofit, not some big tech company that's trying to scoop up your data. So for a lot of reasons, Signal is utilized by a lot of people. A lot of journalists use it. The fundamental first question is, was Signal appropriate to use? Because there's two issues. Number one, was it in compliance with the Federal Records Act? That says that government business needs to be done in a way that captures it. So for history, it's there. Now, there's a way around this, meaning when I was in the White House, sometimes people would text me and say, hey, I didn't have your White House email, so here's that. What you're supposed to do is screenshot that and forward it so that it goes into the channels and it gets captured, right? So that's permissible. What we're learning now is that Signal was, to some degree, permissible, and at least as far as what we know, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. The second question was, is the conversation that's happening in itself permissible? So is the platform permissible, and then the conversation that's happening permissible? And as I said yesterday, they throw around all these terms, right? Top secret war plans. Jeffrey Goldberg has no clue what a top secret war plan is. He's never served in the military. He's not ever had clearance, right? There's actual meaning to these terms. In the same way that, like, when you go to a doctor, when they say certain things, it means certain things. Even in like lawyer speak, there's certain terms, and every industry has them. So when you say something is top secret or classified or a war plan, that means something. And and he threw all that text out today. It's all out there. He put the entire text chain, so you can read it all. Because Jeffrey Goldberg's view was, well, if you guys are saying it's unclassified, then I'm just going to push it all out there. Now, I've read some of it. Some of it I don't think probably should have been in a text chain because for the same reason the Navy doesn't talk about ship movements in the future because it doesn't want people to know stuff, probably should have been talking about some of these things about future strikes that we're going to take. But none of them actually talk about where we're going to be striking or particular targets. So saying we're going to strike at 2:15, I mean, is it helpful? Probably not. Is that giving away some kind of national security coordinates? No, because again, if I say I'm striking at 2:15 or 4 o'clock or whatever, you don't know where I'm striking. So yeah, something's going to happen, but you don't know where. Okay. So again, what's the level of classification? Well, let's take these in two pieces. First, I want to show you something our good buddy, friend of the show, Breland Holohan put out. He went back and dug out that in a story back during the Obama years, The Atlantic, the same publication that put out this huge bombshell, said this in a story about Obama's use of this. The gold standard of encrypted messaging, saying that the Obama and Hillary Clinton staffers all used it. And they just talked about it in the context of other encryption apps and messaging apps. So the Atlantic has saying this is the gold standard. Next question. Can it be used? Right? That's what I said, right? So is it permissible to do government business on this app? Is the first threshold question that needs to get answered. Well, yesterday in front of the Senate, John Ratcliffe, who is the CIA director, he had actually served as acting director of national intelligence, he was the director of national intelligence under Bush, under Trump 1. Sorry, my head is on a Wednesday. And he says, in response to a question from Mark Warner, the Senate vice chair of the Intel Committee, something that's very interesting that I want to play for you. But by the way, listen to Warner, not just Ratcliffe. Watch Warner. It's almost like he doesn't want the answer. Watch this. Take a listen.
Were you on the group chat?
Senator, I was on a Signal messaging group.
So you were the John Ratcliffe on that chat?
I was.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I provide some context, Senator, to that?
Yes, but I've got a series of questions.
Well, but I think it's important because at the outset you made a couple of comments about Signal messaging using encrypted apps. So that we're clear, one of the first things that happened when I was confirmed as CIA director was Signal was loaded onto my computer at the CIA, as it is for most CIA officers. One of the things that I was briefed on very early, Senator, was by the CIA records management folks about the use of Signal as a permissible work use. It is. That is a practice that preceded the current administration to the Biden administration.
Director Ratcliffe, I've got a series of questions. If you're making the statement, if you're making the statement that Signal is a secure channel,
no, can I answer that? It is.
I've got a series of
end-to-end decryption. So
it is.
To finish,
I understand encryption.
It is permissible to use to communicate and coordinate for work purposes, provided, Senator, that any decisions that are made are also recorded through formal channels. Right. So those were procedures that were implemented. My staff implemented those processes, followed those processes, complied with those processes, and finally, just please. So my communications, to be clear, in a Signal message group were entirely permissible and lawful and did not include classified information.
Well, we will make that determination.
Okay. But you hear first, let's just take Warner. It's almost like he doesn't want the answer. I mean, no shocker. He doesn't want to know. It's when Ratcliffe's saying, I want to explain this to you, he's like, I got a bunch of other questions, a bunch of gotcha questions. I need to get you for my clip for TV. The CIA director is saying, hey, here's the deal. It's permissible. Boom. End of story. I was briefed on it. It was put on my computer. So there's the first issue taken off the table. Jeffrey Goldberg didn't say that, did he? Because again, I don't think it's sensational once you realize that it's permissible. Because also, remember, the Atlantic called it the gold standard. Not that they have anything to do with national security, so I don't really care. But it's just funny, it contradicts their own reporting. But here you have the CIA director saying it's permissible. It was installed on my computer. And by the way, it preceded this administration. It was the Biden administration that allowed this. Okay, issue one, off the table. So for all these people in a frenzy, was Signal appropriate? Yes. There's the CIA director saying so. He didn't download it. It was put on his government computer by the CIA as a permissible means of communication. Question two, was the discussion then classified? Now, as I've said, I've read through the entire thing. There are some things that I probably don't think were helpful to be on there. I'm not going to cover for them on that, okay? That's a fact. I don't think talking about upcoming strikes is helpful in a chat that's not guaranteed to be secure. There are secure rooms for this. There are secure phones for this. And if you listen to the chat or read through it, at one point, Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, says, on your high side, I've sent you all this. The high side is the SIPRnet. There's the NIPRnet, the low side, the unsecure regular internet that most of us all use. And then the SIPRnet, which is the secure internet system, the secret and top secret stuff. Okay? And he says in there, I've sent this all to your SIPRnet. In the rest of the discussion, there are some things about, hey, this hit. Those are battle damage assessments. Good job, heart emoji, a fist, a pump. That's not classified. Saying good job, Bobby, putting a heart emoji and a fist and an American flag is not classified. Emojis are not classified. So let's keep in mind the context that this happened. Because what you're seeing in the media is a bunch of people who've never been around classified information, who have nothing, and all they want to do is say, would you do the same if it was Hillary Clinton? Hillary Clinton took documents that were marked secret, top secret, and emailed them. That's not the same thing. It's not. I get the equivalency that they're trying to make. It's not the same. She took documents that were marked, and she doesn't have classification authority. So just to keep in mind, the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, does, the CIA Director does, the Secretary of Defense does. So I'm just telling you that, like, Does this make it good? No, I still think it was ridiculous. The idea that a journalist is in a chat, I don't care if it's an email chain. And of all people, this clown. So I just want you to understand what you're not getting from the media. So hopefully today is the end of this. President Trump seems to have indicated that he has confidence in Mike Waltz and that it's a mistake and it won't happen again. And trust me, having done this personally, screwed up like this, where you've said or done something, I feel for Mike Waltz. He's a really smart guy. And he's serving his country really well. Great background, great understanding of the geopolitical environment. I think he is an asset to this administration. He screwed up. We all do. And of all people, to include in there, Jeffrey Goldberg is unfortunate. But a couple other things to share with you today before we get to Ron Johnson. One, J.D. Vance has updated that trip to Greenland that his wife, Usha Vance, was going to be taking on Friday. He's now going. They're going to that Space Force base that we have in Greenland. No more dog sled race. Sorry. Maybe she was looking forward to it. But I think that this is actually, it's funny how it's being perceived. Some people are like, wow, this is escalating because now it's J.D. Vance. Some people are saying, but you're not doing the whole countryside tour with the National Security Advisor. But I think it's right. I mean, J.D. Vance is going to go over there. Hopefully he comes back. Like I said, my personal view on this is that we should strike a deal to increase our military footprint there because of the strategic importance that Greenland has. That's what I think we should do. And I think Greenland would welcome that. Win-win. So hopefully that's what comes of this. Okay. Couple other things. There were a couple executive orders yesterday that got drowned out because of all this SignalGate news. The most important one is something that we've talked about. We talked about it with our friend Seth Keshel. We talked about it during the election cycle. It is about protecting and preserving the integrity of our election system. If you remember, and I'm not trying to start some conspiracy, the only states, literally the only states that Kamala Harris won are states where no voter ID is required. You want to talk about bipartisan issues? This one will always boggle me. Why is it that people are opposed to voter ID unless they have some nefarious plan? Republicans have taken off the excuse that you can't get an ID. Georgia led the way. They met with the NAACP and implemented a way to make sure that anybody could get an ID. So ask yourself, why? You need one for everything else, right? You need one. Think about this. If you're really poor and you need government benefits, you think they just hand them to you? No. You need a government ID. So Democrats don't care about that. They don't say, oh my God, don't let these people, they can't get their Medicaid or their Social Security or their VA benefits or their WIC, their TANF, their SNAP benefits for the food stamps. You have to have an ID for all that. So we're okay with that. But when it comes to voting, well, no, you don't need an ID for that. You just have to swear who you are. That's insane. And President Trump issued this executive order yesterday. And at the very least, it's making the issue front and center. Talking about the importance of election. And he actually, in this executive order, and I'll try to post it later. I'll tweet it out. But he runs through these other countries. He says, in tabulating votes, Germany and Canada require the use of paper ballots counted in public by local officials, which ultimately reduces the number of disputes. Countries like Denmark and Sweden sensibly limit mail-in balloting to those unable to vote in person and do not count late arriving votes regardless of the date of the postmark. And yet we do all that. I'm a fan of absentee ballots. I know military folks, some people can't. I get it. Sometimes you're sick, you're not going to be in town, you got a surgery, whatever. Absentee ballots are fine. This no excuse mail-in where we send one to everybody. Jimmy Carter himself warned of this in a commission that he led. Again, this is common sense. I don't need a study to tell me if you mail everyone in the country a ballot that somebody might be able to grab it. This is just insane. But this executive order goes through all of the things that he wants to push the Election Assistance Commission to do, how we can prioritize this, what we want them to focus on. So anyway, great stuff on this, and I'm happy he did this, and also focuses on keeping non-citizens from voting. He also issued an executive order, while I know probably not as sexy and attention-grabbing, is important because he focuses on making all government payments electronic, which will save a ton of money. Think about how many times we're sending out paper checks and processing things and mailing them out, how much money that's costing us. It's just small things that make sense that he's taking the way in leading. So anyway, lot to say on that. Before we get to Senator Ron Johnson, though, I guys, you remember my friend Tina Anderson. She's come on the show before, the CEO of Just Thrive. This is a great time to take care of your health. I've talked to you guys before about the products from Just Thrive. I've got the Just Calm. I love the probiotics that Tina has at Just Thrive. The gummy version are my favorite, although this week I've been back on the regular old pills because a healthy gut is critical to everything. To your sleep, your mood, your skin, everything stems from a healthy gut. And the probiotic from Just Thrive means better digestion, healthy immunity, more energy, better weight management. It comes in the capsule or the berry flavored gummy, as I said. But like, it's the only probiotic in the market that actually gets into your gut alive, which is critical. Most of the other ones don't do that. They die. And these guys have more proven research at Just Thrive than anywhere else. So if you guys want to join the healthy gut revolution and take control of your health today, visit justthrivehealth.com and save site-wide 20% with the promo code SPICER. And I'm telling you, while you're there, I'd get the 90-day supply. That's where I think the big value is while you're going to use this code. So justthrivehealth.com. Use promo code SPICER for 20% off. By the way, I get asked this all the time. Where can I get your books signed or whatever? If you're interested in that, I added a section on SeanSpicer.com on the About section. If you're looking for signed or personalized books for someone, all 4 of them are there. You can tell me which one you want, all the procedures to do that, and we will send you a signed book. It walks through how to do that, but that had come down when we changed website. So if you're looking to get books, that's where you go. And lastly, if you're interested, April 9th, it's a Wednesday night, we're going to be doing a seminar on the products that I'm using to get healthy in my wellness journey. I'm talking everything from soap, deodorant, cleaning supplies, the wipes I use here in the studio, even the makeup. It's got everything. This is an American-made company that's doing stuff as an alternative to so many things you get in Target and Walmart. All you need to do is text RSVP to the following number, 276-500-1185. So text RSVP to 276-500-1185. We're going to have this event Wednesday night, April 9th, on a Zoom call. We'll invite you. We'll send you all the details at 8 p.m. Eastern. All right. Without further ado, I want to bring in the Senator from Wisconsin, Ron Johnson. Senator Johnson, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Sean, hope you're doing well.
Well, I am. Thank you. The same in your way. Bunch of stuff to get to today. All right. Everybody's buzzing about this SignalGate thing. Just give me your take. Where does this rise on your level of concern?
It's pretty low. I mean, we have so many problems facing this nation. This is not one that I'm going to obsess over, although the media is. Listen, it's not a good look. It was definitely a mistake. I'm sure it's a mistake that has already been corrected and won't occur again. Again, you were early in administration. You know how overwhelming a task it is, particularly when you're now having to try and clean up all the massive messes left behind by the previous administration. So, again, that'll be up to the president to decide what, if anything, he wants to do with people involved. But again, it's from my standpoint, I'm not worried about it. Didn't have any impact on the strike against the Houthi, which was, I think, the exact right thing to do. The president made the right call. I thought it's quite interesting. I haven't read all of the exchange. I've read reports about it. I thought it provided pretty interesting insight of how thoughtful the decision was, and the opposing sides, which there always are. I have no problem in the fact that people come at issues from different perspectives, and I think it shows a pretty strong presidential decision-making leadership.
Right. All right. I don't want to dwell on it. I just want to ask you one more question, then we're going to move on. I guess the issue that most folks in the media and on the left are having is, was Signal the appropriate place to have a discussion of this nature?
Yeah, I think we need to review the Federal Records Act. It sounds like, again, I haven't verified this, but Signal was actually loaded on their government-issued devices. So what else are you supposed to do? I mean, we live in a modern world now, and you can't always run down to a skiff to discuss everything. So again, the lamestream, the corporate, the legacy media, they're going to blow this way out of proportion, which is exactly what they're doing.
All right. Let's move on to spending. You have been very clear about concerns over the deficit. You come from the business world. Give me a sense of where you think things are right now, just big picture, macro-wise, in terms of the reconciliation effort, cutting spending, et cetera.
So let me lay out just the macro case for my position. In 2019, we spent $4.4 trillion total. This year, we will spend $7.3 trillion. That's a 63% increase as our population has grown about 2.6%. What I've done, I did this in a Wall Street Journal article on January 2nd, is I laid out pre-pandemic spending levels. You go back to Clinton of 1998, when we actually had a surplus. That, by the way, passed the Senate 77-22. Democrats and Republicans serving today voted for that. Go back to Obama 2014 or Trump's 2019. Take today's Social Security and Medicare. You can even take today's Medicaid. Exempt them. Spend what we need to spend. And plus up those other total outlays by population growth and inflation. With Clinton, we'd be spending $5.5 trillion. With Obama's 2014, we'd be spending $6.3. With Trump's 2019, we'd be spending $6.5. There's no justification whatsoever for us to be spending a penny more than $6.5 trillion, and yet we're going to be spending $7.3. And the House budget resolution, that $1.5 trillion in cuts, that's $150 billion off of $7.3. That lands us still spending $7.1 trillion. Sean, I don't think anybody that voted for Trump anticipated we would continue to spend at President Biden's levels. Now, the good news is I was in the White House with President the Thursday before we left on recess. I had an opportunity to talk to him about these pre-pandemic levels. A number of times he said, I love this concept. Everybody on board with this thing? How about the House? The House will love this. So I think the president is certainly sympathetic with my position here. But right now you got Speaker Johnson saying pretty well take the House resolution or take it or leave it. We're going to leave it. That House resolution has no chance in the Senate. So Leader Thune understands that. He's trying to work on something in terms of the big, beautiful bill. I've been saying for quite some time, let's keep this simple. Let's get the border funding done. I've actually proposed a 3-step process. Border funding, you got to throw a defense on that, fine. Then just extend the current tax code. I hate the current tax code, but we have to take an automatic, massive tax increase off the table. Then we start working on the big, beautiful bill, which is also one really big, complex, difficult to pass, high risk, quite honestly, bill to put all your hopes and dreams in. So let's get the border funding. Let's take a massive tax increase off the table. Then let's get down to brass tacks and do the really hard work of returning to a pre-pandemic level of spending and providing, the tax proposals that President Trump had for working class Americans, business tax relief that has already expired, which, by the way, that was a real problem with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. It expires automatically. We can't do that this time either, which is another difference between the House and the Senate versions.
So how many people are on your team on this approach?
A lot.
Really?
Again, I can tell you right now, especially a 3-step process. I mean, John Thune suggested 2 steps. I added the 3rd. Again, I understand the difficult nature in the House. It'll take presidential leadership, but it's the smart thing to do. It's the low risk thing to do. We would already have the border funding done. We could probably have already prevented a massive tax increase, and we could be working on what the House is still going to be working on that doesn't have a chance in the Senate. So,
one of the things that I've been arguing for, though, is that like I wrote a piece in the Newsweek, I wrote a piece in Washington Times, that like if we don't use the congressional majorities that we have now to lock in not just border, but a lot of immigration, like stuff that we as Republicans have talked about. We're going to regret this in a couple of years.
Again, that could already be done. That could already be done. I'm sorry, Mr. President, you were sold a bill of goods by the House, like they're going to come up with some big, beautiful bill. Sean, you remember Obamacare?
Yeah.
It sunk like a stone. Okay. And that's really what the House budget resolution, again, I have sympathy with those guys. I like those guys. They blew it. Okay.
So what's the next step then? I mean, like right now, I get you've got a lot of people on board, but you're right. They've sold the president on this approach. What is it? Is it trying to turn the ship backwards and saying this isn't going to work? We got to stop now. I mean, it seems like the president's on board on this.
Well, if my advice to the president is, admit you made a mistake, go to multiple step process, have the House take up the Senate budget resolution, get it passed, do it now. Okay, it's not that hard. Extend the current tax law, take an automatic tax increase off the table, then get to work on the big, beautiful bill. Now, if he doesn't accept that, I know Leader Thune is trying to work with the House resolution and recognize the reality in the Senate that that's not going to pass. I mean, there are enough of us that will make sure that we're not going to vote for that. And there's no amount of pressure, quite honestly, that President Trump can put on us to pass the House resolution. It's simply inadequate.
But it seems to me they sell this, Senator, as they're the more conservative ones than you guys.
That's a total crock. Again, Sean, $7.3 trillion down to 7.1. Are you kidding me? Again, nobody can refute or has even attempted to refute my logic on a pre-pandemic level of spending. We've got the 5.5 to 6.5. Lindsey Graham agreed and chose for the Senate budget a fourth option, which is use just President Trump's last budget. That puts us at $6.61 trillion. Again, not touching Social Security, not touching Medicare. You don't even have to touch Medicaid. Here's one of the things the House blew, even in their meager spending reductions of $150 billion a year, $1.5 trillion over 10 years. They gave instructions to the E&C committee. $880 billion is coming out of that committee. All they can do is cut Medicare and Medicaid. And I'm saying you don't have to do that. You can exempt all those and still save $700 billion off of what we're spending today just by going back to 2019 spending levels, inflated for population growth and inflation.
So that sounds very reasonable to me. I get that, which is, hey, why don't we actually use something that's based in numbers? Why? Who is resisting that and why? Like somebody's got to say, here's why it doesn't make sense, because that sounds like the people who oppose that sound very swampy to me.
That's the problem. We're dealing with the swamp. They've never been in business. They don't realize how easy this would be in business. Let's take 3 zeros off this thing, or 6 zeros, and you're talking about $1 million or $1 billion company. If my managers back in 2019, if I told them, okay, you can increase your budget, but only based on inflation. We're not growing. If you have more customers, you can do it based on number of customers, whatever. But I mean, those are your constraints. And then 6 years later, I come to find out about 5 or 6 divisions have increased their budgets way beyond the cost of inflation or the number of customers they've added. In a 5-minute meeting, I'd say, you can't do that. Cut your budget back to what it should be, which is 2019 plus inflation and the number of people you're serving. It'd be simple. It would be over in 5 minutes. Every business does does it exactly that way. Not the federal government. The federal government, first of all, we don't even know total spending. 3 years ago during an omnibus spending fight, I asked my Republican colleagues, hey, anybody know how much we spent last year in total? Nobody answered. I went out to the press corps, asked the same question. The auditors, right? The whiz kids out here. Somebody said, well, it's like over $1 trillion. No, that's just discretionary spending. I'm talking about total spending. The answer was $6.5 trillion. We're the largest financial entity in the world, and nobody knows how much in total we spent. They do now because I raised the issue 3 years ago, but there's no process for us to review that. We only appropriate less than 25% now of the federal budget. The rest is on automatic pilot. But under reconciliation, all we can touch is the other mandatory. But again, when people think mandatory, they think Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. there's $1.3 trillion of spending other than those three items. And that went from $642 billion in 2019 to $1.3 trillion now. But there's a
so what makes that money up? What is that though?
It's all over the board. It's what it is, Sean, and this is what the Uniparty has done. They've taken what was discretionary spending and they turned it into mandatory. So they open up holes in discretionary so they can sit back and pat themselves on the back and, oh, we held the line on discretionary spending. We only increased 2% this year. And by the way, that's the mindless approach. So you take 75% of the budget, you put it on an automatic pilot. Nobody ever looks at it other than say you can't touch it. And then on discretionary spending, you don't do zero-based budgeting. You just take what did we spend last year and then pat yourself on the back when you only increase it by 3%. It's a completely mindless approach. But again, probably every Republican member of Congress, when they were campaigning, said we ought to return to zero-based budgeting.
Well, just so the audience understands that, right? And I just want people to get this because you get this as a businessman. Like when you do zero-based budgeting, you stop, you say, let's start this year, clean slate. You have no money. Justify your budget, which I've done in the private sector. I actually did. Even at the RNC, we would start every year. Here's the salaries we need. Here's the number of bodies. Here's how many copiers we need. And we built a budget from zero every time. The government says, oh, you got $100 last year. We'll give you 108 this year. You never have to justify your past. And that's the problem is that you're building off. I mean, it's like building a crappy house off a broken foundation. If it's not there to begin with, you're just going to keep throwing good money after bad.
So, Sean, as you know, every Republican member probably ran on zero-based budgeting, right? I'm not even proposing that. I'm saying, how about a $5.5 to $6.5 trillion base budget? We'll start there. And again, I have this in the Wall Street Journal article on January 2nd. Everybody's known about it. I sent it to everybody. Nobody argues with it, and yet it's being basically ignored. I mean, the minute I start talking about this, everybody's throwing in the towel going, well, we can't do that.
But what's the excuse? Like, why did that? What I've never understood is everything you just said, right? I think most people look at it and say, that makes sense. So when you say this and you outline it in the Wall Street Journal and say, here's what we're spending and why, what is the rationale of another senator or another House member that says, Senator Johnson just can't do it? Like, I keep thinking like, what is it? It doesn't taste good. It's too heavy. I mean, like, what is the excuse?
They offer none because they can't dispute it. It just can't. I kind of like my kids. I said, 3/4 of the word can't is can. But the good news is gaining traction. My last op-ed, my last column that ran in the Wall Street Journal laid out a process to actually accomplishing this. And what I suggested is a group of senators with a group of House members and a group from the administration, probably Russ Vought and his OMB. We set up a panel. We go through the budget line by line. There's about 2,400 individual expenditure items. We go line by line with the department heads and their chief financial officers sitting in front of us, just like you do in a business, a budget review meeting, and they're going to have to justify. Why are you spending more than 2019 plussed up for population growth and inflation? Justify that. They won't be able to. By the way, they won't be able to justify a bunch of things based on Joe's. So this is where this is so complementary. So Elon Musk is uncovering all these grotesque levels of waste, fraud, and abuse. What we ought to be doing is a monthly rescission package, headlined by the top 3 or top 5 or top 10 grotesque examples they've uncovered for the month, add some other stuff to it, and we should start rescinding spending. We can do that in the discretionary accounts. And then the other things have to be handled through, again, a budget review process on the mandatory side. But again, I hear so many people say, well, we're not serious about reducing spending if we don't address the entitlements. And I'm proving that wrong. No, you can leave Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid alone, and you still have $700 billion of savings, just eliminating the inflation, the spending that's above 2019 fully inflated for population growth and inflation. Again, this isn't hard at all. This is low-hanging fruit. And again, what the House did in their meager budget, $1.5 trillion, more than half of that goes to ENC, which can only cut Medicare and Medicaid. I mean, it's just a self-inflicted wound. It's just, I'm sorry, it was stupid to do that. So again, now that the speakers laid down the gauntlet, basically say, take up the House budget resolution or not, we're saying, sorry, digging our heels in. And I hope President Trump understands that. I hope the speaker understands that. I think John Thune definitely understands it, particularly after our discussion last night. That's going nowhere. So time to regroup, either totally retool what the House has done, bring us down to pre-pandemic level, set up this panel so that we can expose this to the public. Again, we need a different process.
Right.
Simpson-Bowles didn't work. It was a commission. It was ignored. We have to have an integrated process for looking at total government spending, and I would say it has to be done every year. Now, I've always said this. Everything should be on budget. And the first thing people say, he wants to cut Social Security, put it on the chopping block. No, we have to look at total spending because we're not doing it right now.
You're quoted as saying, I'm not going to support any budget resolution that doesn't return us to some reasonable pre-pandemic spending base. So if this goes forward, are you a no?
Oh, yeah. And Leader Thune knows that. We told him, very point blank, and we've got more than enough of us to say, you put the House budget resolution on the floor of the Senate, you won't even get motion to proceed on it. It's dead.
Wow. On the tax cut front, because I think you've been very clear on the spending. On the tax cut front, you mentioned we've got these 2017 tax cuts that President Trump passed in his first term. And then he's got a bunch of other stuff. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, potentially a write-off for American-made cars. You've got Senator Pete Ricketts, your colleague out there, talking about potentially eliminating taxes on military benefits, retirement benefits. Where do you come down on what tax package? What's that elixir that needs the recipe of tax cuts that needs to be part of this package?
Well, again, the first thing you do is you take an automatic tax increase off the table. So you just use current policy, one sentence bill, literally extend current tax law. Boom. That massive tax increase is off the table. Then I would love to simplify and rationalize our tax code. And by the way, throwing all this other new stuff, special credits, all kinds of stuff, does not simplify it. It might rationalize it. It might be good from a standpoint of supporting the working men of America. So I support the direction President Trump's going, but I would love to simplify and rationalize the tax code. Obviously we've got parts of the TCJA that have already expired, which we ought to learn from that, right? I mean, that was a blunder. That wasn't very smart, structuring that so that it automatically expires. That's just not smart. So let's not make the same mistake. We can do that by using current policy. So
that means just for the audience to understand that when you say that, if you use current policy, then that won't, quote, add to the deficit. Is that right?
Right. So currently on spending, let's say you've got a spending program that ends and Congress says we're going to extend it. There's no score because it's scored based on current policy. Taxes, however, based on current law. So if tax cut expires, now to extend it is a massive score. By the way, just to show you what BS that score is, when we passed the entire tax package, it was a $1.5 trillion score. If you inflate that based on the CPI, it'd be $2 trillion. Somehow CBO's come up with a $4.7 trillion score of extending part of the TCJA because the system here, it's just all cooked to make sure that we spend as much money as possible and tax as much as possible. Okay, it's completely irrational, yet we're locked into these rules. Again, Crapo and his staff came up with the idea. It's like, well, let's equate the current policy versus current law. And, pointing that out to everybody, you go, well, duh, we should do that. But the House didn't do it. And I know why they didn't, because we got people in the House that want to reduce spending a whole lot more. That's their cudgel to actually reduce spending, but it didn't work.
All right, I got a couple more things I want to hit on. Yesterday, look, President Trump's made it very clear that he doesn't like how some of these district federal judges are ruling against, frankly, what should seem pretty common sense in terms of what he's trying to do. And whether it's oversight over federal agencies as the chief executive, I mean, that's one thing. The rulings on the deportations. Speaker Johnson said yesterday that Congress has the ability to completely eliminate a district and its judge, and then also said desperate times call for desperate measures with respect to at least alluding to the impeachment of judges. So I get it. Right now, a district judge makes a ruling in, Wisconsin, and that ruling is taken nationwide. So they can, quote, eliminate a district. They can also legislate that a district only covers what it does. They can also impeach judges. Are you in favor of actually starting the process of impeaching judges?
Well, first of all, the courts have exceeded their constitutional constraints. Congress has willingly given up its constitutional authority to the executive branch in many cases. So we're out of balance right now. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think it's outrageous that you have district judges issuing nationwide injunctions. The Supreme Court ought to rein that in. There's a really good article in today's Wall Street Journal talking about exactly how to do that. I think, our founders believed that each individual branch would jealously guard their constitutional power so that you couldn't let one exceed its constraints by much before the other two would rein them in. So President Trump is trying to rein in the courts. Congress could certainly try reining the courts. It won't work because all this stuff would require Democrats to cooperate, and they won't. So we can talk about it, but it won't work. I'd be happy to participate in it, but it won't work. So what we really need at this point in time is Justice Roberts. He's not happy with the fact that President Trump is calling for impeachment. Well, Justice Roberts, you got to fix this. Right. I think Justice Thomas has already talked about the abuse of these nationwide injunctions, but the Supreme Court hasn't taken it up. So again, if you want to guard your independence, rein this in. Your district courts are exceeding their constitutional authority. Justice Roberts, Supreme Court, rein them in and stop this abuse.
All right. Speaking of courts, your home state of Wisconsin has a race for a seat on the Supreme Court there. If you're not from Wisconsin watching this show right now, why should you care?
If you want a Republican majority in the House, you should care because we know, because the current radical leftists, they took over the court 2 years ago. They redistricted our state houses, and so our majorities in both the Assembly and the state Senate shrunk. They didn't have time to address the federal congressional districts. They will do this as soon as they get that power, and so we'll probably lose at least 2 seats when they gerrymander. Plus, they'll probably overturn voter ID. They'll turn over any election integrity laws and procedures we have on the books. Probably make Wisconsin uncompetitive for a Republican for the 10 electoral votes for president. So this absolutely has national implications, enormous implications for Wisconsin. They'll overturn Act 10. That'll cost the Wisconsin taxpayers billions over the years. We'll turn Wisconsin into Minnesota, where they've got a governor that they refer to as Tampon Tim. I don't want to see Wisconsin go the way of Minnesota.
Okay. Yeah, don't Minnesota my Wisconsin. How's that?
There you go.
All right, Senator, always appreciate your time and your leadership on these issues. It's so needed, and hopefully people listen to what you're saying and start to weigh in, because you're right. We have an opportunity to do a lot right now with spending. We need to seize the moment. I appreciate your leadership and your time for being with us.
Stay well. Take care.
You bet, sir. Guys, thanks for joining us. What a great conversation as we make it over the hump towards the weekend. Tomorrow, an amazing panel you coming away. And then Friday, Seb Gorka is here. My newsletter is free. As always, go to SeanSpicer.com to sign up. A VIP membership, always welcome. You can give one to a friend as well. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow on The Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.